using a throwaway for obvious reasons, and I've changed some specific details to protect my privacy. But everything I'm about to tell you, it's real. Every single painful, triumphant, heartbreaking moment of it. My name is Claire. I'm 38 years old, and last Thanksgiving my family discovered I had $12 million. But before I get to that disaster, you need to understand how I became invisible in the first place. I was 8 years old when my life split into before and after. Before, I was just Claire Roberts, an only child living in a modest house in the suburbs of Detroit. Nothing special, nothing remarkable. My dad, Richard, would take me fishing at Lake St. Clair on Saturday mornings. We'd sit in comfortable silence, watching our lines bob in the gray Michigan water while he taught me how to tie different knots. My mom, Linda, helped me with homework at the kitchen table, even if she wasn't particularly warm about it. We weren't the Brady Bunch, but we were fine. We were normal. Then came the night that shattered normal forever. I remember waking up to voices downstairs, urgent, panicked voices that didn't belong in our quiet house at 2 a.m. My Aunt Patricia appeared in my doorway, her face pale under the hallway light. "Claire, honey, you need to pack a bag. Your mom's in the hospital." "Is she okay?" I asked, clutching my teddy bear, a brown one with a blue ribbon that Dad had given me for my birthday. "She's fine, but your baby sister is coming early. Too early." Megan wasn't supposed to arrive for another 2 months. The next few weeks blurred together, a chaotic mess of hospital visits, hushed conversations that stopped whenever I entered a room, and the constant scent of antiseptic that seemed to cling to my parents' clothes. I saw my sister once through the NICU window. She looked like one of my baby dolls, but smaller. So much smaller, and covered in tubes and wires. "Don't get too close," the nurse said when I pressed my hand against the glass. That was the first sentence I ever heard about my relationship with my sister. Don't get too close. When they finally brought Megan home 3 weeks later, I ran to hug my mom. She stepped back. "Honey, did you wash your hands? Have you been feeling okay? Any sniffles?" I had been staying at Grandma Dorothy's house. Grandma had baked cookies. We'd read Nancy Drew mysteries together. It had almost felt like a vacation. But when I walked into my room that night, my teddy bear was gone. "Where's Mr. Brown?" I asked, searching under my bed in my closet. Mom didn't even look up from adjusting Megan's bassinet. "We had to throw out anything that might carry germs, sweetie. You understand?" I didn't understand, but I learned not to ask. Our home transformed into something unrecognizable. Hand sanitizer stations appeared in every room. The sharp smell of bleach became our permanent air freshener. To this day, that scent makes my chest tight. Mom created a laminated schedule of Megan's medications, doctor appointments, and feeding times that took over the entire refrigerator door. There was no room for anything else, especially not me. The pattern started small. If I sneezed at breakfast, Mom's eyes would go wide with alarm. "You're not getting sick, are you?" She'd already be reaching for the phone. "Maybe you should stay at Grandma Dorothy's tonight, just to be safe." The first few times, I thought it was fun. Grandma let me eat cookies before dinner. She had this amazing collection of vintage costume jewelry that she'd let me sort through for hours, teaching me about different clasps and settings, how to spot quality even in inexpensive pieces. Aunt Patricia had every Nancy Drew book ever published, and she didn't care if I stayed up late reading. But kids aren't stupid. Eventually, I figured out what was really happening. I wasn't going on adventures. I was being removed, quarantined like some kind of biohazard. My presence was a threat. My existence could harm my precious baby sister. It didn't matter that Megan's health stabilized by the time she was 3. It didn't matter that her doctor said she was developing normally. The rules had been set, the roles had been cast, and I had been assigned my part. The dangerous one who needed to be kept at a distance. "Claire's always been so independent," Mom would tell relatives, as if that explained everything. "She doesn't need as much attention." No, I learned to stop asking for attention. There's a difference. I tried everything to make them see me. When I was 10, I brought home a report card with straight A's. I was so excited, practically bouncing as I handed it to Mom in the kitchen. She was updating Megan's appointment calendar on the refrigerator. She glanced at my grades for maybe 2 seconds. "That's nice, honey." She didn't look up, didn't hug me. Just went back to color coding Megan's schedule. A week later, Megan got a B- on a spelling test. Mom made her favorite dinner to celebrate her improvement. When I was 11, I won first place at the science fair with a project about renewable energy. I'd worked on it for 3 months, building a miniature wind turbine that actually generated electricity. The judges said it was high school level work. Dad helped me carry the display board inside. I was beaming, ready to show Mom. "Can you put that in the garage?" he asked. "Your sister's allergic to cardboard dust." Is that even a thing? I didn't argue. I just nodded and dragged my first place project out to the garage, where it collected actual dust until I eventually threw it away. The refrigerator became a shrine to Megan's mediocrity. Her C+ in English? Displayed proudly with a "We're so proud" magnet. Her participation ribbon from the spelling bee where she misspelled necessary? Front and center. My SAT prep scores, my National Honor Society certificate, my debate team trophies, they lived in a box in my closet. No one ever asked to see them. But the moment that truly broke something inside me, I was 12 years old. I discovered the piano in the school music room and became obsessed. We couldn't afford lessons, so I taught myself through YouTube videos and library books. For 3 months, I practiced every day after school, hiding in the music room, playing until my fingers ached. I was preparing for the school talent show. The song I chose was "Bridge Over Troubled Water." Not exactly subtle, looking back, but I was 12 and hurting, and the lyrics felt like they understood something no one else did. I made the mistake of telling my parents about it. I made the mistake of hoping. "The talent show is Friday night," I said at dinner, trying to keep my voice casual. "It starts at 7. I'm playing piano." Mom nodded absently. "We'll try to make it." I should have known better. The night of the show, I was backstage in my best dress, a blue one Grandma Dorothy had bought me, when Dad called. "Honey, we can't come. Megan has a fever." "How high?" I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't matter. 99.1. Your mom doesn't want to leave her. 99.1 degrees. Barely a fever, the kind of temperature that goes away with a single Tylenol. "But Dad—" "I'm sorry, Claire Bear. We'll make it up to you." They never did. I stood backstage and watched the audience fill with parents, proud parents, parents with cameras and flowers, parents who showed up. Row 3, seats 4 and 5, the ones I'd told them to sit in, stayed empty. I almost didn't go on, almost walked out the back door and never touched a piano again. But then I saw her. Carol Thompson, the owner of Carson's Diner where I sometimes got breakfast on my way to school, had slipped into a seat in the back row. She waved at me when she caught my eye. I didn't know how she'd found out about the show. I didn't know why she'd come, but she was there. So I played. I poured every ounce of pain and loneliness and desperate hope into those keys. I played like my family was watching, even though they weren't. I played like I mattered, even though no one had ever made me feel like I did. When the last note faded, there was a moment of silence. Then Carol stood up. She was the first one clapping, the loudest one clapping. A standing ovation of 1. "You played beautifully, sugar," she told me afterward, wrapping me in a hug that smelled like coffee and maple syrup. "Don't ever stop playing for the people who don't know how to listen. Play for yourself." I cried the whole way home. 2 weeks later, the entire extended family, both sets of grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, showed up to watch Megan's 15-minute flute recital. She played Hot Cross Buns, badly. I sat in the back row. No one asked what I thought. I was 14 when I found the letter. Grandma Dorothy had a beautiful antique jewelry box with a secret drawer. She'd shown me how to open it years ago when teaching me about hidden compartments in vintage pieces. That summer, I was helping her organize her collection when I decided to clean out the secret drawer. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. It was a letter from my mother to Grandma Dorothy, dated when Megan was 2 years old. "Mom, I can't do this anymore. I can't take care of both of them. Megan needs so much attention, so much care. I found a family in Ohio, good people, stable income, who are looking to adopt. Claire would have a better life with them. She'd get the attention she deserves. The letter went on, but my hands were shaking too hard to read the rest. In the margins, in Grandma Dorothy's familiar handwriting, were 3 words circled and underlined. No, absolutely not. And below that, if you do this, Linda, you lose me too. That child is not disposable. I carefully refolded the letter and put it back in the secret drawer. I never told anyone what I found. Not then, anyway. But something shifted inside me that day. I understood, finally, that I wasn't just being ignored. I had almost been given away. The only person who fought to keep me was an 84-year-old woman with a collection of costume jewelry and a spine made of steel. Grandma Dorothy became more than my grandmother after that. She became the only person in the world who had chosen me. High school wasn't about education for me. It was about survival. It was about building the ladder I'd use to climb out of that house. The way I saw it, being invisible had one advantage. No one was watching my failures, which meant no one was monitoring my successes either. I could do whatever I wanted, so I did everything. I joined the debate team and discovered I had a gift for dismantling arguments while keeping my composure. Something about years of swallowing my feelings made me excellent at staying calm under pressure. I won the state championship twice. Both times my parents couldn't make it. Megan had cheerleading practice. She was on the C team. She never actually played. I became president of the National Honor Society and editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. I worked part-time at Carson's Diner, where Carol made sure I got extra tips and always sent me home with leftover pie. Your family might not see what you are, Carol told me once, but the world will. Just give it time. I held on to those words like a life raft. But here's the thing about becoming obsessed with achievement. It comes at a cost. I didn't have close friends. I told myself I didn't have time, but the truth was I didn't know how to let people in. When you grow up being treated like a threat, you learn to keep your distance. When no one celebrates you, you stop expecting celebration. When the people who are supposed to love you can't be bothered to show up, you stop believing anyone will. My guidance counselor worried I was burning out. I just smiled and said I was fine. I was always fine. I had to be. Junior year, I took the SAT. I remember sitting in that gymnasium, surrounded by hundreds of other students, and feeling strangely calm. This test was objective. It didn't care about my family dynamics or my sister's fictional allergies. It measured what I knew, what I could do. When the results came back, I stared at the screen for 20 minutes. 1,600. Perfect score. Fewer than 1% of students achieve that. I'd done it on my first try, with no prep courses, no tutors, no parental involvement whatsoever. I ran home, actually ran, bursting through the front door with the printout in my hand. Mom, look! She was at the kitchen table, helping Megan with her English homework. Again. Mom, I got a perfect SAT score, 1,600. Mom glanced up briefly. That's nice, honey. Can you keep it down? Megan's trying to concentrate. Megan smirked at me over her vocabulary worksheet. Yeah, some of us actually have to study, Miss Perfect. Mom patted Megan's hand. Don't worry, sweetheart. You're just a different kind of learner. I stood there holding the paper that represented everything I'd worked for, everything I'd achieved completely on my own, and watched my mother comfort my C-average sister while ignoring me entirely. The printout never made it to the refrigerator. But that night, something unexpected happened. I was in my room, staring at the ceiling, when I heard a soft knock. A piece of paper slid under my door. It was a sticky note stuck to a slice of cold pizza on a paper plate. I know, I'm proud. Dad. 4 words. That's all he could manage. 4 words delivered in secret, like being proud of me was something shameful. But I kept that note. I still have it, 24 years later. Not because it was enough. It wasn't. But because it proved that somewhere, buried deep under years of passivity and silence, my father saw me. He just never fought for me. Senior year, I applied to 15 colleges without telling anyone. I wrote every essay myself. I requested every recommendation. I filled out the FAFSA alone, staying late after school because I didn't even know what my parents' tax information was and had to figure it out from old documents I found in the filing cabinet. Harvard accepted me. Yale accepted me. Princeton accepted me. I kept every acceptance letter in a locked box under my bed. I knew what would happen if Megan found out. Suddenly, she'd be depressed about being left behind, and I'd be guilted into staying close to home or, worse, not going at all. The letter I was waiting for came in March. University of Michigan. Full ride, tuition, room, board, books, everything covered. I sat in my favorite spot at the local library, a window seat on the fourth floor overlooking the park, and cried for an hour. Not sad tears. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. I was getting out. When I told my parents at dinner, their reactions were exactly what I expected. Mom, Michigan? But that's so far. What if Megan needs you? Dad, I hope you're not expecting us to help with costs. Your sister's cheerleading competitions are expensive. Megan, oh, thank God, finally! Can I have your room? I need space for my TikTok setup. The summer before college, I worked double shifts at Carson's. Carol made sure I went home with extra tip money and all the pie I could carry. She also taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. In diners and in life, she said, wiping down the counter one late night, the people making the most noise usually have the least to say. Pay attention to the quiet ones, Claire. They're the ones who matter. Move-in day arrived. My parents couldn't make it. Megan had a cheerleading competition. She was still on the C team. She still didn't play. Aunt Patricia drove me instead. She helped me set up my dorm room, hung my posters, made my bed. Before she left, she pressed an envelope into my hands. Your Grandma Dorothy wanted you to have this. Inside was $500 in cash and a handwritten note. For the girl who taught herself piano and never stopped playing. Make your own music, sweetheart. I'll be listening. Grandma. I found out later that Grandma had been saving that money from her Social Security checks for months. That first night in my dorm room, alone for the first time in my life, but somehow less lonely than I'd ever been at home, I made myself a promise. I will build a life so extraordinary that being overlooked becomes impossible. Not for revenge, not to prove anything to them, but for the 8-year-old girl who got sent away for sneezing, for the 12-year-old who played piano to an empty audience, for every version of me who was treated as disposable. I will show her she was worth fighting for, even if I have to fight alone. College passed in a blur of all-nighters, instant ramen, and the most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced. Freedom. For the first time in my life, no one was watching to make sure I didn't sneeze near anyone important. No one was measuring my worth against my sister's. No one was treating me like a walking biohazard. I could breathe. I threw myself into my studies with the same obsessive energy I'd applied to everything in high school. Double major in art history and business. Dean's List every semester. Graduated summa cum laude. My parents didn't come to graduation. Megan was transferring to her third college in 2 years. Something about the vibe not being right at the previous 2, and they needed to help her move. Again. Grandma Dorothy sent flowers. Carol mailed me a card with a $100 bill tucked inside and a note that said, "Knew you'd do it, sugar. The pie's on me when you're home." I framed my diploma myself and hung it in my tiny apartment. It was the first achievement I'd ever displayed on a wall. After graduation, I had options. A prestigious firm in New York offered me an entry-level position with a path to management. The salary was good. The prestige was better. Everyone told me to take it. I chose Detroit instead. I told myself it was practical, lower cost of living, closer to Grandma Dorothy, a chance to build something in a city that was rebuilding itself. But if I'm being honest, part of me still hoped, still believed that if I stayed close enough, worked hard enough, achieved enough, maybe one day they'd finally see me. Pathetic, right? I know. Trust me. I know. I took a job at Everett and Phillips Auction House, one of the most respected auction houses in the Midwest. Old money clients, important estates. The kind of place where a single painting could sell for more than my parents' house was worth. My job? Estate sales. Specifically, cataloging the belongings of wealthy people after they died. It wasn't glamorous. I spent my days in dusty mansions, sorting through decades of accumulated stuff. Photographing everything from antique furniture to vintage clothing. The pay was modest. The hours were long. Most of my coworkers saw it as a stepping stone to something better. I saw it as an education. Every estate was a puzzle. Every collection told a story. And I started noticing things, small things that others missed. A piece of furniture that looked ordinary but had unusual joinery. A painting with a signature that didn't quite match the style. A piece of jewelry that felt heavier than it should. Those hours with Grandma Dorothy sorting through her costume jewelry collection, learning about clasps and settings and hallmarks, they'd trained my eye in ways I was only beginning to understand. 6 months into the job, I was assigned to the Kingston estate. Eleanor Kingston had been a wealthy widow with no children, no close relatives, and a house full of what everyone assumed was costume jewelry. Rooms and rooms of it, brooches, necklaces, earrings, bracelets, thousands of pieces accumulated over 8 decades of life. "Just catalog it all as costume," my supervisor said. The family already had an appraiser come through. Nothing valuable. I nodded and got to work. For 3 weeks, I sorted through Mrs. Kingston's collection. Most of it was exactly what the appraiser had said. Pretty but worthless vintage pieces, the kind you could find at any estate sale for a few dollars each. But on my last day, buried in a velvet-lined drawer, I found a brooch that made me stop. It was Art Deco, geometric shapes in silver tone metal with clear stones that everyone had assumed were rhinestones. Nothing special at first glance, but something about it nagged at me. The weight was wrong, too heavy for costume jewelry. I turned it over. The clasp mechanism was intricate, far more complex than anything you'd find on a cheap piece. And there, barely visible without a magnifying glass, were tiny marks I recognized from Grandma Dorothy's lessons. Maker's marks. French, from the 1920s. My heart started racing. I spent my entire lunch break researching, cross-referencing images and databases. I stayed late at the office using the company's subscription to antique jewelry archives. The more I dug, the more certain I became. This wasn't costume jewelry. This was Cartier, original, from a limited 1925 collection created for European nobility. The problem was, I was nobody. A junior cataloger 6 months on the job. Who would believe me? So I did what the debate team taught me. I built my case. For 2 weeks, I spent every lunch break and evening researching Art Deco authentication. I used a chunk of my pathetic savings to pay for an online gemology course. I created a presentation with comparative images, historical documentation, and detailed analysis of the maker's marks. Then I walked into my boss's office. William Harrison was a silver-haired man who'd been in the auction business for 40 years. He barely looked up when I knocked. "Mr. Harrison, I think we might have something significant in the Kingston collection." He sighed, still scrolling through emails. "Claire, we've already cataloged those as costume pieces." "I know, sir, but look at these maker's marks." I spread my research across his desk. They match perfectly with Cartier's 1925 signatures. The weight is consistent with platinum, not silver-tone metal. In the stones, he finally looked up, really looked. At the photos, the documentation, the evidence I'd assembled. "Where did you learn all this?" "My grandmother," I said. "She collected vintage jewelry. She taught me what to look for." Harrison studied me for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. 2 weeks later, that costume brooch sold at auction for $47,000. It was part of a collection created for a Russian countess in the 1920s, one of only 12 pieces ever made. The others had been lost to history. This one had been sitting in a dead woman's drawer, mistaken for junk, until I found it. After the Kingston find, everything changed. Harrison started trusting me with more complex authentication work. Other catalogers began asking for my opinion on questionable pieces. Word spread through the industry that Everett and Phillips had someone with an eye. I devoured knowledge like I was starving for it, because I was. I took every online course I could afford. I spent weekends at estate sales training my eye on thousands of pieces. I started a notebook documenting different authentication techniques, maker's marks, and historical periods. My apartment looked like a jewelry scholar's fever dream. Printouts of vintage hallmarks covered every wall. Reference books were stacked on every surface. I fell asleep reading about Georgian mourning jewelry and woke up thinking about Art Nouveau enameling techniques. 2 years after the Kingston discovery, I got my big break, the Rothschild collection. Not those Rothschilds, but old money nonetheless. A prominent Detroit family whose matriarch had passed away, leaving behind an estate that had the entire industry buzzing. I was part of the team assigned to catalog their jewelry collection. Hundreds of pieces, important pieces, the kind of collection that would make careers. Most of the items were exactly what they appeared to be: valuable, well-documented, properly authenticated. But in a secondary jewelry box, one the family had dismissed as grandmother's everyday pieces, I found something that made my breath catch: an Art Nouveau pendant. Delicate, beautiful, but almost too beautiful. The style was consistent with a famous French jeweler whose private commissions had become legendary. Most of his pieces were in museums or had been lost during World War II. To find an undocumented one would be... I spent 3 days researching. I barely slept. I compared every element, the enamel work, the stone settings, the chain links, to documented pieces in museum archives. It was real. A piece that everyone had assumed was lost during the chaos of World War II had been sitting in a Michigan family's jewelry box for 80 years. When it sold at auction, the final price was $238,000. Harrison called me into his office the next day. I expected a promotion, a raise, maybe a corner desk. Instead, he said something that would change my life. "Claire, you're wasting your talent here." I blinked. "Sir? You shouldn't be working for someone else. You should be running your own authentication business." I almost laughed. "With what money? What reputation? You're just the person who found a $250,000 pendant that every other expert missed." He leaned back in his chair. "I've been in this business for 40 years. I know talent when I see it. You have something rare, Claire. Don't waste it making other people rich." I didn't jump at the opportunity. Not right away. For 6 months, I wrestled with doubt. Who was I to start a business? I was the girl whose family didn't even celebrate her perfect SAT score. The girl who played piano to an empty room. The girl who was almost given away because she was inconvenient. Who would hire someone whose own family doesn't believe in her? I asked my therapist, Dr. Rebecca Walsh. She looked at me over her glasses. "The question isn't who would hire you, Claire. The question is why you still need their belief to believe in yourself." I didn't have an answer, but I started making a plan anyway. I took out a loan against my car. I emptied my savings account, all $8,000 of it. I found the cheapest office space in Detroit, a room above a Chinese restaurant that perpetually smelled like Kung Pao chicken and had Wi-Fi that only worked if you sat in the corner by the window. The rent was $400 a month. The space was roughly the size of my college dorm room, but it was mine. I furnished it with a card table from Goodwill and a chair I literally found on the curb. I cleaned that chair with so much disinfectant that for weeks my office smelled like Kung Pao chicken and bleach. The irony wasn't lost on me. The first 3 months were terrifying. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. with cold sweats, running mental calculations about how many months I had before bankruptcy. I'd lie in bed doing math. Rent plus loan payment plus utilities plus food equals X, savings minus X equals Y months until I'm homeless. Y was getting smaller every week. By month 2, I had exactly one client, a small antique dealer who paid me $200 to authenticate a collection of Victorian mourning jewelry. I found nothing remarkable. He paid me anyway, which felt like charity. By month 3, I was eating ramen for every meal. Not by choice this time, and seriously considering whether I'd made a terrible mistake. Then Grandma Dorothy called. "How's the business, sweetheart?" I burst into tears, told her everything, the empty office, the dwindling savings, the constant fear that I was proving everyone right, that I was nothing, nobody, just a girl who got lucky a few times. She listened without interrupting. When I finally ran out of words, she said, "Do you remember when you were 10 years old and you spent 3 months organizing my jewelry collection?" "Yes," I sniffled. "Do you remember what you said when I asked if you were bored, when I told you we could do something else?" I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. "You said, 'Grandma, I'm not done yet. I want to finish what I started.'" She paused. "Claire, you've never been someone who quits. Don't start now. Give it 6 more months. If it doesn't work, you can always find another job, but if you quit now, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering. I gave it 6 more months. In month 4, a dealer I'd worked with at Everett and Phillips called. He had a client with a collection of Victorian brooches. The family wanted authentication before selling. The collection was massive, over 200 pieces spanning 3 generations. I worked on it for 2 weeks straight, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, documenting everything with obsessive precision. And I found them. 2 rare pieces that had been misidentified as later reproductions. They were originals, early Victorian museum quality, worth a small fortune. The owner was so thrilled with my detailed analysis that she not only paid my full fee, but offered me a 10% commission when the pieces sold. That commission? $86,000. More money than I'd made in the previous 2 years combined. Suddenly, my phone started ringing. Word spread in the way it does in tight-knit industries, through whispers, through recommendations, through the quiet acknowledgement that there was someone new in the game worth knowing. Private collectors heard about my eye for missed pieces. Estate lawyers started calling for advice on inherited jewelry. Even Everett and Phillips began sending me authentication work. I'm pretty sure Harrison was behind some of those referrals. He never admitted it, but every time I thanked him, he'd just smile and say, "Talent deserves opportunity." By year 2, I hired my first employee. Her name was Emily Foster, a recent gemology graduate who reminded me painfully of myself. Brilliant, hardworking, completely overlooked because she was quiet and female and didn't play the networking game. She'd applied to every major auction house in the region and been rejected by all of them. I hired her in 15 minutes. "Why me?" she asked, stunned. "You barely looked at my resume." "Because I know what it's like to be underestimated," I said. "Now prove me right." She did. Within a year, she was my head of authentication. Today, she runs our Chicago office. By year 3, we'd outgrown the Kung Pao chicken room. I leased proper office space in downtown Detroit. Glass walls, good lighting, a conference room that didn't smell like takeout. By year 5, we had offices in 3 cities, Detroit, Chicago, and New York. We became known for discretion. It turns out that wealthy people often want their jewelry authenticated without the whole world knowing what they own. We specialized in private, confidential assessments. No leaks, no gossip, no judgment. The money was significant. But here's the strange thing about success when you've grown up invisible. You don't quite trust it. Every morning, I'd wake up half expecting to discover it was all a dream, that I was still the girl nobody celebrated, the girl who almost got given away, the girl whose achievements weren't worthy of refrigerator space. So I kept it quiet, especially from my family. 4 years into building my business, Aunt Patricia called with news. "Your parents are struggling, Claire. Megan's student loans are crushing them. Medical bills are piling up. They might have to sell the house." I sat in my corner office, the one with the city view and the original artwork on the walls, and listened to my aunt describe my parents' financial desperation, the same parents who never came to my graduation, who forgot my birthdays, who chose Megan's C-team cheerleading practice over my state championship debates. The logical thing would have been to feel nothing, or to feel satisfaction, some kind of karmic justice for years of neglect. Instead, I felt sick. Because despite everything, it was still the house I grew up in. Still the kitchen where I'd tried to show my mother my report cards. Still the garage where my first-place science project had gathered dust. Still the bedroom where I'd hidden from a world that didn't want me. I couldn't watch them lose it. So I did something stupid. Something my therapist would later call a form of self-harm disguised as generosity. I started sending money anonymously, $5,000 a month, transferred to their account through a series of intermediaries that couldn't be traced back to me. When my parents asked about it, I played along. "I'm contributing what I can," I told them during one of our rare phone calls. "About $1,000 a month. I'm living on rice and beans." They assumed the rest came from Aunt Patricia or other relatives. I never corrected them. "You're a good girl, Claire," my mother said. "Even if you're not very successful, at least you have a good heart." Not very successful. I'd just closed a deal worth more than she'd earned in her entire life. "Thanks, Mom." Things got more complicated when Megan decided she wanted an MBA. Not just any MBA. A private university MBA, the kind that costs $150,000 for 2 years. My mother called me in tears. Real tears, not the performative kind she used when Megan scraped her knee. Claire, we can't afford this, but Megan deserves a chance to better herself. She's finally found her passion. Megan's passion had changed approximately 17 times since high school. Photography, yoga instruction, life coaching, social media management, now business. Maybe she could look at state schools, I suggested. They have excellent programs. You don't understand, my mother interrupted. Your sister has standards. She can't just go anywhere. I increased my anonymous transfers to $7,000 a month. My bank account didn't notice. But here's the irony that still makes me laugh bitterly. The same business school Megan wanted to attend, they'd invited me to be a guest lecturer. The dean personally asked me to speak about luxury goods authentication and entrepreneurial growth. I had to make up an excuse to miss Sunday dinner that week so my family wouldn't find out. I stood in front of 200 MBA students and talked about building a business from nothing, about trusting your expertise, about the importance of persistence when everyone underestimates you. Meanwhile, my family thought I was still working at that little antique shop. My existence became a study in contradictions. During the week, I was Claire Roberts, founder and CEO of Everett Authentication, one of the most respected jewelry authentication firms in the country. I flew business class to meet clients in Dubai and Hong Kong. I was quoted in Forbes under my company name, thankfully. I authenticated pieces worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. On Sundays, I was Claire the Disappointment, the older sister with the little job who wasn't as successful as Megan. I wore Target clothes deliberately chosen to look unremarkable. I drove my high-end BMW to a parking garage 6 blocks from my parents' house and walked the rest of the way. I started playing a game with myself, wearing authentic, valuable jewelry to family dinners just to see if anyone would notice. No one ever did. Megan once spent 20 minutes showing off her new Michael Kors watch, retail price $200, bought on sale for $150. She kept angling her wrist so everyone could admire it. I was wearing a vintage Patek Philippe that cost more than her car. That's beautiful, Megan, I said, and meant it. Not the watch, her complete obliviousness to the irony sitting across the table. One Sunday dinner, my mother patted my hand sympathetically. Honey, your clothes are looking a bit worn. Do you need money? I know you're trying to save, but self-care matters. I was wearing a $3,000 cashmere sweater. I'd chosen it specifically because it looked normal. I'm fine, Mom. Thanks for asking. That night, I told my therapist about the conversation. How did it make you feel? Dr. Walsh asked. Honestly, I don't know anymore. I stared at the ceiling of her office. Sometimes I feel powerful, like I'm in on a secret no one else knows. Sometimes I feel pathetic, like I'm still that little girl desperate for her parents to see her. And sometimes, I trailed off. Sometimes? Sometimes I wonder who I actually am. The CEO who's built something real, or the invisible daughter still trying to prove she matters. Dr. Walsh was quiet for a moment. Then she said, maybe you're both. Maybe the question isn't which one is real. Maybe the question is which one you want to keep feeding. I didn't have an answer, but I kept showing up to Sunday dinners anyway, kept playing the role, kept waiting for something. I didn't even know what anymore. Looking back, I think I was waiting for the bomb to drop. I just didn't expect my sister to be the one who lit the fuse. The thing about living a double life is that you always know, somewhere deep down, that it can't last forever. Every secret has an expiration date. Every carefully constructed facade eventually cracks. I just never expected mine to shatter at Thanksgiving dinner in front of 20 people, with my sister holding the sledgehammer. It started with a phone call. My mother was crying, not her usual Megan-related dramatics, but genuine distress. She'd been diagnosed with a herniated disc. The pain was constant, debilitating. The thought of cooking Thanksgiving dinner for the entire extended family had reduced her to tears. I don't know what to do, Claire. 20 people are expecting a meal and I can barely stand up. For a moment, just a moment, I felt like the daughter she needed. Not the invisible one, Not the disappointment, just needed. Let me handle it, I said. I'll have the food catered. Oh, honey, we can't afford a caterer. Don't worry about the cost. I've been saving. You're not taking out a loan, are you? Claire, I won't let you go into debt for this. I almost laughed. The catering company I was planning to use had done events for my business. Corporate dinners, client appreciation nights, the kind of events where a single appetizer costs more than my parents' weekly grocery budget. I'll be fine, Mom. Just rest. I coordinated everything with the caterer, a high-end firm that specialized in the kind of food that makes you wonder why anyone bothers cooking at home. Maple-glazed turkey, truffle mashed potatoes, Brussels sprouts that cost $45 per serving. The total bill was more than my parents thought I earned in 2 months. But that wasn't the only reason I was dreading Thanksgiving. I had a work obligation I couldn't avoid, a major auction in Hong Kong. A client was bidding on a rare Art Nouveau necklace, potentially a significant historical piece, and they needed me available for immediate authentication if they won. I had to bring my laptop. The food arrived at exactly 11 a.m., delivered by professional staff in crisp white uniforms. My mother watched from the couch, her back supported by approximately 17 pillows, as they transformed her kitchen into something from a magazine. Megan arrived an hour later, already in a mood. Store-bought stuffing? She picked up a serving dish and sniffed dismissively. Mom's is so much better. I didn't respond. I'd learned long ago that engaging with Megan's provocations only gave her ammunition. And these Brussels sprouts look weird. She wrinkled her nose. What are those little brown bits? Pancetta, I said. Italian bacon. They're maple glazed. Sounds pretentious. She shut up after tasting them, though. Small victories. The extended family began arriving around 2 p.m. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, the full Roberts clan, plus a few extras. 20 people crammed into a house that comfortably fit maybe 12. I smiled. I made small talk. I answered the same questions I answered every year. Still working at that antique shop, Claire? Yes, Aunt Helen. Found a husband yet? Not yet, Uncle Robert. Your sister was just telling us about her new marketing position. Isn't that exciting? Very exciting. Megan's marketing position was an entry-level job where her primary responsibility was managing the office's social media accounts. She'd been there 4 months. According to her, she was practically running the place. Around 4 p.m., while everyone was settling into their post-appetizer stupor, I slipped away to check on the Hong Kong auction. I went to my old bedroom, the only room in the house that hadn't been renovated in the past 20 years. Megan had demanded and received 3 complete bedroom makeovers. Mine still had the same faded carpet, the same water stain on the ceiling from the roof leak when I was 10 that no one ever fixed. I sat on my childhood bed and opened my laptop. The auction was heating up. My client was in third position but bidding aggressively. I pulled up my authentication software, cross-referencing the piece's details with historical records. If they won, I'd need to provide preliminary analysis within hours. Multiple tabs were open. My company's account dashboard, pending contracts, recent transactions, quarterly reports. I was so focused on the auction that I didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. I didn't hear the door open. I didn't notice Megan standing behind me until she spoke. "What you doing, Claire?" I turned around, already clicking to minimize my windows, but I was too slow. Megan was staring at my screen with an expression I'd never seen before. Her eyes were wide, moving rapidly as they scanned the numbers I'd failed to hide. "What is this?" Her voice was strange, tight. "Work stuff, nothing interesting." I stood up, positioning myself between her and the laptop. "Did you need something?" But Megan wasn't listening. She was calculating. I could see it happening, the wheels turning, the conclusions forming, the opportunity presenting itself. She thought she'd found something embarrassing, something she could use to finally prove that her successful big sister wasn't so successful after all. Maybe a failed business venture, maybe a pile of debt, something to make herself feel better. What she found was the opposite. "Let me see that." She grabbed the laptop before I could stop her. "Megan, don't—" but she was already walking toward the living room, laptop in hand, calling out in that sing-song voice she used when she wanted everyone's attention. "Hey, everyone! Let's see what Claire's been working on that's so important she had to miss appetizers!" "Megan, give that back!" I followed her into the living room where 20 relatives sat with plates of gourmet turkey, half drunk on the expensive wine they'd mistaken for something from Trader Joe's. Megan stood in the center of the room, triumphant, and flipped the laptop around so everyone could see the screen. Time to see what kind of important work Claire does at her little antique shop. The room went quiet. I watched 20 faces register what they were seeing. The numbers on the screen, the company dashboard, the figures that didn't make sense for someone who supposedly worked at a little antique shop. Current account balance, $12,400,000. Pending authentication contract, $485,000. Recent transaction, $1,200,000. Quarterly profit report, $4,200,000. Megan's face went through 5 stages in 3 seconds. Triumph, confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally something that looked like nausea. This can't be right." Her voice cracked. The silence was deafening. I could hear the antique clock on the mantel, the one I'd given my mother for Christmas, the one she'd complimented as a lovely reproduction, ticking away the seconds. "Claire?" My mother's voice was small, uncertain. "What is this?" I took a breath, felt something shift inside me. A wall crumbling, a door opening. 24 years of hiding, 24 years of playing small, 24 years of protecting people who had never protected me. It was over. "It's my business, Mom." I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "I own one of the largest jewelry authentication companies in the country, that little antique shop you never asked about. It has offices in 3 cities. We authenticate pieces worth millions of dollars." I looked around the room, at the stunned faces, the dropped forks, the half-chewed bites of food frozen mid-swallow. "That catering you're enjoying? I paid for it." "The wine you've been drinking? It cost more than your monthly grocery budget. That worn-out sweater Mom was worried about last month? It's cashmere. It cost $3,000. My father's face had gone gray. My mother's mouth was opening and closing like a fish. Megan looked like she might actually faint. Good. The silence lasted exactly 12 seconds. I know because I counted. Then my mother stood up so fast her chair crashed to the floor behind her. "You have millions?" Her voice had jumped 2 octaves. "You have millions of dollars and you let us struggle?" "Struggle?" I kept my voice level, though my hands were shaking. "I've been sending you $7,000 every month for the past 4 years. Anonymously. That money you thought was coming from Aunt Patricia and generous relatives? That was me. 7,000. My mother sputtered. "That's nothing compared to what you have. We're your parents. We raised you." And there it was. Not congratulations, not "we're so proud." Yay, not "how did you do this?" Just "you owe us more." "Your sister has student loans." My mother gestured wildly at Megan, who was still frozen in place, clutching my laptop like a lifeline. "She's been struggling to get on her feet, and you've been sitting on millions?" Megan finally found her voice. "I need that money more than you do. I deserve it. You owe me." "I owe you?" I laughed, actually laughed. "What exactly do I owe you, Megan? For what?" For being your sister. For putting up with you all these years." She was crying now, the performative tears she'd perfected over decades. "I need at least $2 million to start my life properly. You've been hiding this from me." My father finally spoke, quietly, almost apologetically, as always. "Claire, family is supposed to help each other." Something snapped. 30 years of silence. 30 years of swallowed words. 30 years of being the invisible daughter, the inconvenient child, the almost given-away girl. It all came flooding out. "Help each other?" My voice rose for the first time. "Help each other? You want to talk about help?" I turned to face them all, the whole family, Every relative who'd asked about my little job with that patronizing smile. Every person who'd celebrated Megan's mediocrity while ignoring my achievements. Let me tell you about our family's version of help. When I was 8 years old, you started shipping me off to Grandma Dorothy's house every time I sneezed. Not because you were worried about me, because you were worried I might infect your precious Megan. Claire, my mother started. I'm not finished. My voice was ice. When I was 12, I taught myself to play piano. I practiced for 3 months for the school talent show. You missed it because Megan had a 99-degree fever. 99 degrees. That's barely a fever. That's take a Tylenol and go to school territory. Your sister was fragile. Your sister was fine. She'd been fine for years by that point, but you'd already decided who mattered and who didn't. I was on a roll now. The words poured out like water from a broken dam. I got a perfect score on my SAT. Perfect! Top 1% in the country. You told me to keep it down because Megan was studying. I won the state debate championship twice. You couldn't make it because Megan had cheerleading practice. She was on the C team. She didn't even play. My mother's face was red. We did the best we could. You didn't come to my college graduation. You were helping Megan move to her 3rd school in 2 years. But sure, tell me more about how family helps each other. I turned to face my mother directly. And Mom, I know about the letter. She went white. Completely, absolutely white. What letter? Megan asked. The letter Mom wrote to Grandma Dorothy when you were 2 years old. I kept my eyes locked on my mother. The one where she looked into having me adopted, where she found a nice family in Ohio who might want to take me off her hands because I was inconvenient. That's not... I never... My mother was stammering. Grandma Dorothy saved that letter. I found it when I was 14. She wrote in the margins, "That child is not disposable. She's the only reason I'm still part of this family." I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His jaw was clenched, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. You knew, I said quietly. Didn't you, Dad? You knew about the letter. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The guilt was written all over his face. All those years you knew she wanted to give me away, and you never said a word. You never fought for me. You just let it happen. The room was completely silent. Even Megan had stopped crying. I took my laptop from her unresisting hands, picked up my bag, the Hermes bag my mother had once complimented as a nice knockoff. This bag, by the way, it's real. Cost more than your car, Megan. I walked toward the door. Claire, wait. My father stood up. I turned back one last time. You want to know the really sad part? I kept waiting. For years, I kept waiting for you to see me, to be proud of me, to show up for something, anything, that mattered to me. I looked at each of them, my mother, still pale and trembling, my father finally meeting my eyes with something that might have been regret, Megan, mascara running down her face. I built a $12 million company. I've been featured in Forbes. I lecture at business schools. I've authenticated pieces in museums around the world. And you know what? None of it matters to you, because I'm still just Claire, the inconvenient one, the one you almost gave away. I opened the door. I'm done waiting for you to see me. I see myself now. That's enough. I walked out into the cold November air and didn't look back. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could drive. Not because I regretted what I said, not because I wanted to go back, but because 30 years of suppressed emotion doesn't just evaporate. It has to go somewhere. I cried, ugly, heaving sobs that fogged up the windows and left me gasping for air. I cried for the 8-year-old who lost her teddy bear and was told not to ask about it. For the 12-year-old who played piano to an empty room. For the teenager who hid her acceptance letters in a box under her bed. For all the versions of me who deserved better and never got it. When I finally calmed down enough to drive, I pulled out of the parking garage, the one 6 blocks from my parents' house where I'd been hiding my car for years, and headed home. My phone was already exploding. 47 missed calls, over 200 text messages. The family group chat was having a collective meltdown. Mom, 7:42 p.m., How dare you walk out on family? Mom, 8:15 p.m. We need to discuss this like adults. Mom, 9:03 p.m. Your sister deserves a share of your success. Mom, 10:30 p.m. I've already been looking at houses. There's a lovely one in Grosse Pointe. Mom, 11:45 p.m. Why aren't you answering? This is your mother. Megan, predictably, had taken the fight to social media. Her Facebook post was a masterpiece of victimhood. Just found out my millionaire sister has been hoarding wealth while watching her family struggle. For years, I tried to help Claire with her career, giving her advice about moving on from that little antique shop. And the whole time she was secretly rich? The betrayal is unreal. Some people just don't know the meaning of family. The comments were already piling up. Distant relatives I hadn't seen in decades suddenly had opinions about my moral character. High school classmates I'd forgotten existed were weighing in on the importance of family loyalty. I turned off my phone. Monday morning, I arrived at my office to find them waiting in the lobby. My mother, my father, Megan. They'd told Emily, my head of authentication, that they had an appointment for jewelry appraisal services. "I'm sorry, Claire," Emily whispered as I walked past. They seemed legitimate. "It's fine, I'll handle it." I led them into my office, the corner one with the city view, the original artwork, the wall of credentials they'd never known existed. Megan was staring at everything with naked envy. My mother was already calculating. My father just looked tired. "We've discussed this as a family," my mother began, as if I hadn't been part of that family for 38 years. "We think it's only fair." "Fair?" I sat behind my desk. Interesting word choice. "We think it's only fair," she continued, undeterred, "that you set up trust funds for each of us. Your father and I want to retire. We're thinking a beach house in Florida. Megan needs capital to start her new life." "2 million," Megan said immediately. "At least. I have plans." "And we'd like a monthly allowance going forward," my mother added. "The $7,000 was a good start, but obviously you can afford more." I let them talk, let them outline their demands. The beach house, the trust funds, the monthly payments that would essentially make me their personal ATM. When they finally finished, I pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" Megan asked. "Canceling the $7,000 monthly transfer." I tapped through the screens, showing them as I went. "There, done. No more anonymous support." "You can't do that!" My mother's voice was shrill. "We depend on that money." "You depended on a daughter you ignored for 30 years. That's not depending, that's exploitation." I pressed a button on my desk phone. "Security? I have 3 visitors who need to be escorted out." "You're calling security on your own parents?" "I'm calling security on 3 people who showed up to my workplace under false pretenses to demand money. That's textbook harassment." See, 2 uniformed guards appeared at my door. "This isn't over, Claire," my mother shouted as they led her away. "You owe us! We're your family!" "You were never my family," I said quietly. "You were just the people I lived with." Emily watched them leave, then turned to me. "Are you okay?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "Yeah," I said finally. "I think I actually am." My mother tried one last card. She called Grandma Dorothy, expecting her to guilt-trip me into compliance, to remind me of family obligations and blood being thicker than water. It backfired spectacularly. "Good for Claire," Grandma Dorothy told her. "It's about time someone in this family succeeded on their own terms. And Linda, if you ever try to use me against my granddaughter again, you won't just lose her. You'll lose me too." My mother didn't speak to Grandma Dorothy for 2 months after that. Grandma called me the same night. "I heard you finally told them the truth." "I'm sorry if I caused problems." "Don't you dare apologize!" Her voice was fierce despite her 84 years. "I've been waiting for this day for 20 years. The only thing I regret is that I wasn't there to see Linda's face." I laughed, my first real laugh since Thanksgiving. "I kept your letter," I told her. "The one she wrote. The one where you said I wasn't disposable." "You were never disposable, Claire. You were just surrounded by people too blind to see what they had." She paused. Your grandfather was the same way with me, you know. His family thought I wasn't good enough. I spent years trying to earn their approval. What changed? I stopped trying, started building a life that made their opinion irrelevant, and eventually I realized I'd built something they couldn't touch, something that was entirely mine. The jewelry collection. Among other things. I could hear the smile in her voice. You've done the same thing, sweetheart. You've built something that belongs to you. Don't let anyone take it away. The harassment eventually stopped. After my lawyer sent a detailed cease and desist letter outlining exactly how harassment charges would affect their lives, my mother's standing in her church community, my father's pension, Megan's job prospects, they finally backed off. According to Aunt Patricia, they'd rewritten the narrative entirely. Now they never wanted Claire's money anyway, and were praying for her salvation. They told everyone I'd become materialistic and lost my way. I didn't care. I moved to a new house with a better security system, changed my phone number, focused on my business, which was thriving. It turned out that my discretion during the family scandal impressed certain high-profile clients who valued privacy above all else. Megan announced on Instagram that she was starting her own jewelry authentication company. I gave her 6 months before she realized that this field requires years of expertise and hard-won reputation, not just startup capital and good intentions. But the most important change was internal. I started therapy sessions twice a week instead of once. Dr. Walsh helped me understand that my need to hide my success wasn't just about protecting my family's feelings. It was about protecting myself from the devastation of still not being enough. You built a $12 million company, she said during one session, and part of you still believed it wouldn't matter to them, that nothing you achieved would ever matter. I was right, wasn't I? You were right about them, but you were wrong about yourself. Your worth was never dependent on their recognition, Claire. It never was. I started playing piano again. The first song I practiced was Bridge Over Troubled Water, the same piece I'd played to an empty audience 26 years ago. This time I played it for myself. 6 months after Thanksgiving, a letter arrived at my office. Handwritten. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from my father. Claire, I don't expect you to read this. I don't deserve your attention. But I need to say what I should have said 30 years ago. I knew about the letter, the adoption letter. I found it before your grandmother did. And I did nothing. I told myself it was because your mother was stressed, because Megan's health scared us, because it was just a moment of weakness that would pass. But the truth is simpler and uglier. I was a coward. I was always a coward. I saw every achievement you earned, every award you won, every milestone you reached without anyone cheering you on. I kept them all. There's a box in my closet, has been for 24 years. Your SAT scores, your debate trophies, photos from your college graduation that I drove 3 hours to attend in secret because I didn't want your mother to know. That note I slipped under your door the night of your SAT results, I wrote a longer one first, 3 pages about how proud I was, how I knew you'd do amazing things, how sorry I was for not being the father you deserved. I couldn't give it to you. I was too ashamed. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for a relationship. I've lost that right. I just need you to know that you were always seen, Claire. By me. I just never had the courage to show it. There's a spot at Lake St. Clair, the dock where we used to fish on Saturday mornings. I'll be there this Sunday at sunrise. I won't expect you. I won't blame you if you don't come. But if you do, I'd like to give you that box. Love, Dad, P.S. For what it's worth. I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. I read the letter 7 times. I almost didn't go. Dr. Walsh and I spent an entire session discussing it. The risks of reopening old wounds. The possibility that it was just another manipulation tactic. The likelihood that I'd be disappointed again. What do you want to do? She asked finally. I want to believe him, I admitted. And I hate that I want that. Why do you hate it? Because wanting things from them has only ever hurt me. That's true. She leaned forward. But Claire, You're not the same person you were. You're not the powerless child who had to hide her achievements in a box. You're a woman who built an empire from nothing. Whatever happens at that lake, you'll survive it. The question is, will you regret not going? Sunday morning, 5:47 a.m. Freezing cold, the kind that makes your bones ache. I sat in my car at the Lake Street Claire parking lot for 15 minutes before I could make myself get out. He was already there, sitting on the old dock, hunched against the cold, a cardboard box on the bench beside him. He looked smaller than I remembered, older. I walked toward him. My footsteps on the wooden planks were the only sound in the pre-dawn silence. He turned. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying, or like he hadn't slept. You came. I almost didn't. I know. He gestured to the bench. Will you sit? I sat. The box was between us. We didn't speak for a long time, just watched the sun slowly climb above the horizon, painting the lake in shades of gold and pink. Finally, he pushed the box toward me. Open it. Inside was everything he'd described. My SAT score printout, the one I thought had been thrown away. Programs from debate competitions with my name circled, my National Honor Society certificate, newspaper clippings about my company that I didn't even know existed, and at the bottom, a stack of unsent letters, birthday cards he'd never given me, notes of congratulation for achievements he'd never acknowledged. I wrote one every year, he said quietly. Every birthday, every milestone. I could never find the courage to give them to you. I picked up a card. It was for my 16th birthday. Claire, you are the strongest, most determined person I've ever known. I'm sorry I don't tell you that enough. I'm sorry I don't tell you at all. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Love, Dad. Why? My voice cracked. Why keep all this secret? Why let me think you didn't care? He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because your mother needed me to choose, and I was too weak to choose you. He finally looked at me. That's not an excuse. There is no excuse. I failed you, Claire. Every single day I failed you. Then why are you here now? Because I'm dying. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. They found it 3 months ago. He smiled sadly. Funny how knowing you're running out of time makes you realize what actually matters. Does Mom know? She knows about the cancer. She doesn't know I'm here. He looked out at the water. She'll be furious when she finds out. But I've spent 40 years letting her anger control me. I'm done. We sat in silence again. The sun was fully up now, sparkling on the water. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said finally. Or your mother. Or Megan. What we did, what I allowed to happen, it's unforgivable. I know that. Then what are you asking? Nothing. He shook his head. I'm not asking for anything. I needed you to know that the problem was never you. It was never about you not being enough. It was about us being too broken to see what we had. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out one more item, a small velvet box. This was my mother's. Your grandmother's. She left it to me when she passed, years before you were born. She told me to give it to my daughter someday. He pressed it into my hands. I should have given it to you decades ago. I opened the box. Inside was a ring, Art Deco, platinum and diamonds, absolutely exquisite. It's real, I said automatically, my professional eye assessing it. Early 1920s, French hallmarks. This is worth... I don't care what it's worth. His voice was thick. I care that it goes to the person it was meant for. I closed the box, held it tightly. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. I don't know if I even want to try. I know. But, I took a shaky breath. I'm glad you came. I'm glad you showed me this. I gestured to the box of memories. It doesn't fix anything, but it helps to know I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't invisible to everyone. You were never invisible to me, Claire. Tears were running down his weathered face. You were just hidden behind my cowardice, behind your mother's fear, behind your sister's needs. But you were never invisible. Not to me. We sat together until the sun was fully up. We didn't hug. We didn't make plans to meet again. We didn't pretend that one conversation could heal 30 years of damage. But when I finally stood to leave, I took the box with me. And for the first time in my life, I felt something other than anger toward my father. I felt pity, and underneath that, buried deep but undeniably present, a tiny, fragile seed of something that might, someday, grow into peace. It's been a year since that Thanksgiving. My father passed away 4 months ago. I visited him in hospice 3 times. We never had a dramatic reconciliation. We never became close. But we talked, really talked, for the first time in our lives. He told me about his own childhood, a father who worked constantly, a mother who struggled with the depression. He explained, without excusing, how he'd learned that staying silent was safer than speaking up. On his last day, when he could barely speak, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for asking," I said. He smiled, and then he was gone. My mother didn't speak to me at the funeral. Megan spent the whole service shooting me dirty looks. I sat in the back row, the same spot I'd occupied at every family event for 30 years, and didn't cry. I'd already done my grieving, not for the father I had, but for the father I could have had. The relationship we might have built if either of us had been brave enough. Grandma Dorothy came to stay with me for a month after the funeral. We spent the time organizing her jewelry collection, properly this time with my professional expertise. I discovered 3 pieces she'd thought were costume that were actually quite valuable. "Guess you learned from the best," she said, winking. "I learned from the only one who mattered." My company is doing better than ever. We opened a 4th office in Los Angeles last month. I've been featured in 3 more industry publications. Last week, I authenticated a piece for a museum acquisition, a career highlight I would have killed for 10 years ago. But the achievement I'm most proud of? It's smaller, quieter. I performed Bridge Over Troubled Water at a local charity event last month. I was terrified. Hadn't played for an audience since I was 12 years old. But this time, when I looked out at the crowd, I didn't see empty seats. I saw Carol Thompson, who'd driven 3 hours to be there. Emily Foster, who'd taken the day off just to attend. Dr. Walsh, sitting in the 3rd row with a tissue already in her hand. Grandma Dorothy front and center, wearing the Cartier brooch I'd bought her for her 85th birthday. I saw the family I'd chosen, the people who'd chosen me back. And in the back row, almost hidden in the shadows, I saw a familiar face. Megan. She didn't approach me after the performance, didn't apologize, didn't ask for money. She just caught my eye, nodded once, and slipped out before I could reach her. I don't know what it meant. I don't know if it meant anything at all. But for the first time in my life, I didn't need it to. I walked off that stage into the arms of the people who loved me, the people who saw me, really saw me, exactly as I was. And that was enough. It was always going to be enough. I just had to learn to believe it.